So we're picking up Tanya Peg Dalad, and we're in the middle of talking about mitzvahs and how important mitzvahs are. And therefore, I'd like to say the following few stories. And starting off way back when, many years ago, maybe it was even 5 to 10 years ago, and there's a Yid who lives in Crown Heights, and his name is Rabbi Shalom Charitonov. Now, you see, Rabbi Charitonov is a spiritual mentor, a mashpia in Yeshivas Oli Teir. And he, one day, gets a phone call. It's like, hello, it's like Rabbi Charitonov. We're calling from the Hatzolah fundraiser. We're trying to fundraise money for Hatzolah. It's like, Hatzolah, for sure, I'll give you a donation. And they're like, no, it's not donations. We're having a Hatzolah raffle. If however much money you donate, that's how many raffle tickets you get. So it's like, okay, I'll buy a raffle ticket, support Hatzolah. He buys a raffle ticket. Anyways, that night, they have a big raffle. And they announce the winner of $25,000. First prize is Rabbi and Mrs. Shalom Charitonov. Incredible, fantastic, mazel tov. What would you do with all that money? Imagine, he works in a yeshiva. His wife works in Old Torah preschool. I've heard the good words that sometimes his wife's students graduate preschool and many years later end up in her husband's class when they're 20 years old in the senior academy. And apparently they always stay exactly the same. Anyways, we can talk about that some other time. So time goes by, and not only does one night go by, but it actually comes to the next day. And Hatzolah received a surprise donation from Rabbi Charitonov of $25,000. Wow. Imagine what he could do with all that money. Come on. He's working a low-income job. His wife has a low-income job. $25,000, you could do good stuff with that. How many cans of seltzer can you buy with $25,000?
50,000.
You know, if you go to a nice bougie corner store in Park Slope, you can buy like probably maybe six cans of seltzer. No, it's a lot of money. What did he want to do with a lot of money? A mitzvah. He wasn't interested in the money. He bought a ticket to support Hatzolah. He wanted the money. I'll support Hatzolah. That's what he was interested in. That's what he was interested in doing.
So happy.
As a matter of fact, I was one time standing by, I walked into my father's store. My father was sitting there doing accounts. He says, I'll tell you something very interesting that happened. I really shouldn't be saying this publicly, but it's a very interesting story. He said that year was coming up to Rosh Hashanah. And usually before Rosh Hashanah, he gives a nice big donation to various Tzedaka causes. So that year was coming up to Rosh Hashanah. Business was slow. And he's thinking, maybe, I'm making less money than usual this year. Maybe I should give less donation. It's a lot of money to give away. And he thought about it and he decided, nope, no matter what, I'm giving my regular donation. Hashem will figure out the money. I'm giving my donation. Fine. So he gives a donation. And then Shabbos came. And Shabbos, he closed down the shop. And then he comes to Sunday. And Sunday comes. And that day, the total amount of money tendered, not the profit, but the total money that came in is exactly 10 times the amount of the donation to Tzedaka, to the dollar. Isn't that fascinating? Actually, about Tzedaka, we're speaking about it anyways. It says in the Gemara, it's the one thing. Hashem said you can't test Hashem. Imagine about a chutzpah. If someone says, Hashem, I'll make a deal with you. Yeah, it's a chutzpah. You ever heard the joke about the guy who's had an important business appointment? So he gets up early that morning, he puts on his best suit and tie, puts on his tuxedo, and he drives off to his business appointment. He gets there, and the parking lot is packed full, and he's driving around in circles. He can't find the parking lot. It's 5 minutes to his meeting. It's 2 minutes to his meeting. 1 minute left to his meeting. He's looking around. He's like, God, if you help me find a parking spot by some miracle, any money I make out of this meeting, I'll give half of it to charity. And just then, right in front of him, a car pulls out of the spot, and then he pulls right in before anyone else can take it. And he says, God, don't worry about it. I found one. So, that's someone making deals with God. But it says in the Gemara, there's one time you're allowed to test God. And you know what that is? In regards to charity. Hashem says, you give tzedakah and I will pay you back. And test me. Try me on it. Try me. Want to bet? I'll bet with you. That's what Hashem says about giving charity. You give the tzedakah, I will personally pay you back, and you can try me out. See what happens. Challenge accepted. Fine. I'd like to say a story of Reb Shimon ben Yochai. You guys ever heard of Reb Shimon ben Yochai? People in the Welt call him Reb Shimon bar Yochai. Not sure where the name bar Yochai came from, but every time you see it in the Gemara, it's ben Yochai. Either way, Sir Reb Shimon was one Erev Rosh Hashanah, the day before Rosh Hashanah, the day of judgment, that what would happen to people an entire year is coming. And on Erev Rosh Hashanah, instead of davening and learning, you know what he does? He goes for a surprise visit to some of his nephews. And he walks into his nephew's house, and they're like, "Hey, our dear uncle, what do we have the honor for?" So he says, "Tell me, you guys give tzedakah?" They're like, "Yeah, of course we give tzedakah." He's like, "This coming year, you should give lots of tzedakah." They're like, "Okay, sure, tzedakah. Yeah, big mitzvah. Love giving tzedakah. Very giving, charitable people." And then he says, "But make sure to keep a account. Keep a book of accounts. And write down every cent you give to tzedakah." Okay, no problem. Don't mind being organized. Good advice from your loving uncle. So, Rosh Hashanah comes and goes, and the New Year comes about. Now, these gentlemen, they were merchants. They were making good money in the silk business as a luxury item back in the day. A lot of money to be made. And they're buying and selling, and they're giving a lot of tzedakah, a lot of money to tzedakah, and they write down every coin, every dinar, every silver stella. They write down each one that they give. It's coming close to the end of the year, and they're at home, busy doing their thing. All of a sudden, the door breaks in. Armed legionnaires from the Roman governor burst in and say, "You're under arrest." They're like, "What? What do we do? We didn't do anything. I'm telling you, we're innocent." They're like, "Tell that to the judge," and they haul them off to prison. What was their charge? They were told in due time they had been accused of illegally importing silk items without paying tax on it. Now, you see, it's very important you pay tax. Otherwise, how is the emperor going to make money? And if the emperor is not making money, then what's the point of my whole kingdom? So they were hauled off to be tried. Now, whoever made up this story about them wasn't the nicest person, but in ancient Rome, you couldn't exactly hope for a fair trial. It was actually worth it for them just to make a show trial, to show everyone, don't mess around with the emperor's money. They were whittling away in the dungeon, waiting for their sentence to come about. And their uncle comes and visits them, and they say, "Uncle, what should we do? How do we get out of this?" So, Rabbi Shimon says that, "Did you give tzedakah this year?" They're like, "Yeah, we gave tons of tzedakah. What's that got to do?" He's like, "Did you keep accounts?" They're like, "Yeah, we have an account book." It's like, "Let me see the account book." He opens up the account book, and he says, "You gave 294 gold coins to tzedakah this year. I saw before Rosh Hashanah that there was a decree hanging upon you that this year you would have to be arrested and fined the astronomical sum of 300 gold coins. It was going to ruin you. So I thought, why should we find all that money by the governor and be embarrassed and hauled off to prison and get into a case and then lose your business overnight? How about I'll tell you to give lots of tzedakah, and instead you can get rid of this decree by slowly paying it off to charity." So they're like, "Well, we gave lots of tzedakah, but we didn't know it was anything about 600. You didn't tell us anything about 300. Why didn't you tell us that had to be 300 gold coins?" So he tells them, "If I told you what was going on, you would have paid it off as a fine. You would have paid off the tzedakah as a fine, not for the sake of Hashem." So they're like, "Well, what do we do now?" Fact of the matter is, we're 6 dinars short. We're 6 gold coins short. So he says, "Tell me, do you have any money on you?" So they say, "Yeah, we smuggled some money in. We always keep a couple of coins sewn in between the layers of our garments in case you need, like in case of emergency. In case of emergency." I have a story about that in a second. 1 second. And you have to remind me about the sewing in. So they tear open their clothes and they pull out 6 gold coins. And the uncle gives it to the guard as a bribe. And with the last 6 gold coins, the decree against them from heaven was absolved, and they managed to escape and run away. But from here we see the great power of the mitzvah, especially the mitzvah of tzedakah. They can save people from such terrible things. So my story is that there was this lady who used to come shop in my parents' store, an older lady back from Europe. And she always came shopping, and in her pocketbook, she always had her passport and $100 bill inside the passport. And every time she had to pay for her groceries, a weekly shop, she'd pull out her pocketbook, pull out a passport, take out $100 bill, and say, "I always carry around a $100 bill in my passport because in the old days, you never know what's going to happen. You always need to have your passport and money ready to run. But now, I don't need it anymore, so now I'll pay with it." So it's a cool story the first time, but she would do it every week when she goes shopping. So eventually, The guy by the counter says, "Tell me, where do I get a passport like that?" She's